What is up, guys? In today's video, we're going to be talking about the Spider-Man Web Shooters in Season 3 and whether or not they are worth using, because they were actually added back into the loot pool. As always, if you guys do enjoy this video, find it helpful, informative, or interesting, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you would like to see more, comment down below if you're going to be using the Spider-Man Web Shooters, and if you guys would like to use my code in the item shop when getting anything. It is EvolvedJake, just like my channel name is, and it is underneath the webcam at all times. So the way these were added to the game was kind of unique because they were accidentally added early with the update on Thursday, and then they were removed a few hours later because their actual release was supposed to be after yesterday's power hour. So now they are actually attainable in game. I know that was like kind of a confusing situation where they added them, took them out, added them again, but it does seem like they are actually here to stay for probably the remainder of the season. And you can't actually find these from regular means of looting. You find them from the Spidey backpacks around the map. I'll have a map on screen now of where these backpacks are, or where they can spawn. The backpacks themselves are not 100% spawn rate. So you could go to one of these locations and just have it not spawn in that match. But if the backpack does spawn, it is guaranteed to drop the Spider-Man Web Shooters. And the Web Shooters are one of the better traveling mobility items in kind of like Fortnite history. And these mythics are actually a lot better than usual because they are unlimited. There is no cap on how many uses you have. And then you also won't take fall damage when you're shot out, which is a pretty big deal. In the past, I'm pretty sure you did take fall damage when shot out, or definitely with like the grapple glove, which was like the Fortnite version. But unlimited uses is great, and then no longer taking fall damage kind of helps you deal with one of the main problems of this item. If you get shot in the air when using them, you do like fall to the ground and then the item will go on cooldown, but you won't actually take fall damage anymore. And even without fall damage, this is one of the main weaknesses of the item. Getting shot at by an enemy can put you in a terrible kind of like no man's land situation. And this also makes it not the greatest for pushing enemy players. Like, not taking fall is great, but if you're out in the middle of the open with no cover and your mobility item is on cooldown, that's probably still going to be a fight that you lose anyways, especially with how accurate a lot of the mid-range weapons are this season. You will get chunked down really quick. So no fall damage is great, but it doesn't mean that you can just use it, you know, without thinking of the consequences. And this is going to be really true if you try to push people with it. Like, let's say you get damage on somebody and then they're behind something like a tree or a rock and you want to like push them. With something like the overdrive grenade, the shockwave grenade, the kind of crash pad juniors, you just use your mobility and then you're on that enemy whether they like it or not. You know, you just use it and then you're there. But with the web shooters, the enemy kind of has a say in whether or not you're pushing them, whether or not you're using your item, and it can potentially backfire because you try to push them with it, you get shot out. Now you're out in the open, they're already looking at you and shooting you, and you're going to be going back to the lobby really quickly. And this is, you know, exact same case is going to be when it comes trying to escape a fight or reset a fight. The fact that enemies can basically just decide if you're allowed to use your movement or not means things can, you know, really backfire on you, and it makes the item, you know, really inconsistent. I think especially in higher skill lobbies when people have pretty decent aim and they're hitting a majority of their shots, this can be an item that is really kind of risky and it can backfire on you really easily. But with these negatives being said, I still think this is probably one of the best seasons for this item since Chapter 3 Season 1. Every time it's returned since then, I haven't really liked it, and even coming into this season, I was not expecting it to be good, but I think it actually works out really well after playing with it. So first we have the shock rocks, and you know, you activate the shock rocks and then you have the charges on your character. And so if you get into a situation where you're shot and your web is broken and then now you're potentially going to be in a bad situation, you could just start spam jumping, and before you even would have hit the ground, you're out of there, and maybe you threw the enemy's aim off and you kind of avoided that bad situation. Having the shock rocks on your character as like an insurance policy makes it to where you can use it a little more loosely and a little more risky, and even in situations where it could have backfired, you can get out of there just, you know, super easily because the shock rocks are incredibly good. And the fact that it's just on your character, if you have them, it works perfectly. And then normally, like I said, that setup would be pretty solid. Shock rocks and the web shooters, you would have most of your bases covered for mobility, but you're still going to be missing a pushing item, and you're probably going to have to use your rocks more often than you would want to make that happen. And so you're setting yourself up for potential failure by using your rocks too frequently and then not having it for the important moments later on. But the addition of the pocket item kind of solves that for you, because you can use something like the shockwave grenade, or you can use something like the crash pad junior, and then you have that item for those important pushing situations, or those important, like, I need to get out of here and reset real quick. You have the item for those situations without consuming an inventory slot. And that's usually one of the main gripes I have with this item is, like, sure, there's times where it's good, but I don't want it to take an inventory slot over other forms of mobility that are better for the more important moments. But I think between shock rocks, the web shooters, and then either the crash pad juniors or the shockwave, you have most of your bases covered. Like, relying on the pocket item a bit too much for your pushing mobility can come back to bite you in situations where, like, it's on cooldown and you really need it. But most of the time you're going to be completely fine. And even if you do have a timing problem here, the crash pad juniors have a really fast recharge time, and you actually get 2 of them. So if you found yourself struggling with the lack of pushing mobility when using the web shooters and shock rocks, maybe try using the crash pad juniors as your pocket item. That way you get it a little more frequently. It does have, you know, its disadvantages over the shockwave, but the timing difference on the pocket item can kind of make up for it. So I think with the current meta of this season, I thought the web shooters were going to be really bad, but you have a lot of things that actually help you deal with the weaknesses that normally would be running the web shooters. And then when it comes to traveling mobility this season, we also have the slider boots, but I think the web shooters are just a million times better than these boots. On one, you don't have to worry about accidentally using it when you don't want to, when you're just trying to crouch behind cover, which that's huge. But also the boots overheat unless you have the mythic version, and the boots are also very loud and I think a bit easier to track since you're just on the ground. The boots have a very, like, they're very loud audio, and the range on visual audio is also really far, whereas the web shooters, the audio is weird this season. I feel like I can hear like a very faint web shooter audio whenever anyone's like on the map using it, it seems. But even the audio that's a bit louder when they're close to you is still significantly more quiet than the boots, and so you aren't going to be alerting enemies to your position as much. And then even if they do somewhat kind of know, like, okay, there's somebody around me using the web shooters, it could be harder to pinpoint where that person is or where they're coming from, and definitely a lot harder than the boots. So I think even just you take the audio out of it, I think I would much rather have the web shooters over the boots. One's unlimited, one, you know, isn't, unless it's the mythic. But the audio, I think, just makes it a clear-cut choice that the web shooters are the better traveling mobility. So even if you really like traveling mobility, I think the web shooters are going to be the better one. And just in summary, like I said, it's typically not the greatest for zero build especially, but with shock rocks in the loot pool, you cover your bases and you'll be able to get yourself out of the bad situations before it's really bad. Like, normally if you get shot out, you could land and then maybe shockwave away, but that little bit of timing of you landing and then needing to pull out your shockwave and then use it, like, you've probably taken so much damage there. But the fact that the rocks can just be activated before you hit the ground, you're already spam jumping out of there, you know, limits your exposure to that bad timing. The pocket item, you know, shores up one of the weaknesses of not having a pushing item, and, you know, results in that griefing you less often. And then also the fact that there's no fall damage, I think also just makes these really good. You would be able to avoid the fall damage with the shock rocks, but, you know, there's times where I get shot out and I'm okay enough that I don't want to use the shock rocks. And with how this season plays, conserving your rocks is really ideal. So I think the web shooters are actually really good. I probably would still rather use shock rocks and overdrive nades, but I was expecting to hate using this item this season with how accurate the ranger pistol is, but it actually plays better in this season than I feel like it has since Chapter 3, Season 1. But that is going to be it for this video. As always, if you guys did find this to be helpful, informative, or interesting, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you would like to see more, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.